17th, sort of 18th of May, trying to kind of, and I'm sort of reading from his email, trying to get feedback from the various groups, the working groups, with really the question of how ready are they for the new regulatory regime, and what information support could come from our groups to make it easier for everyone. And I think he's already spoken to the development team, the operations, and the manufacturing. Um, I'm sure some of you have already been involved in some of those meetings already. But there's obviously different people have different clarity. So manufacturers might have some clarity, but they're like, well, um, you know, we're kind of not sure yet as to what we need to be providing, or we're already providing it. Whereas developers are maybe getting information about some of the decisions making that they're taking, trying to keep that golden thread going, making sure they've got things like fire safety cases or fire strategies updated. Mainly because the bottom line is, I don't think we're going to get a list of things that we have to tick off to say, yes, we've got all of those, so we are compliant as such. Then that comes back to the original idea of the question will simply be, is your building safe? And that's the kind of responsible people, etc. They've got to say it. I think from a design point of view, George said that, as we're in the designer working group at the moment, George has spoken to people like Scott, for example, Scott Sanderson, and that their practice, what they're keen to make sure is that they're not thinking of individual elements and tracking those, like a fire door, but making sure that they're somehow thinking, and I don't really know what they're doing as such, but somehow thinking about the fact that the assembly of the wall, the door, the ironmongery, the fire dampers are all kind of being tracked and monitored, because it's obviously the weakest link is the thing that where things go wrong. So how do they do that? Whether it's using the models, so using some of the built-in data to somehow say, if you're checking the fire strategy for the doors, make sure that the fire dampers are somehow linked to that. So obviously there are databases and digital ways of linking things, but also I guess from a general reviewing drawings, commenting on information we get from manufacturers, that's one way that I know that we can do that, and we're trying to create checklists for that. So I think the going back to George's question is like, and these are questions that I have as well, because there's so many presentations I've been to. I'm sort of slightly also confused myself in terms of, okay, what do we have to do from a Fire Safety Act point of view? And this is where it'll be useful to kind of see any case studies of live projects that we're now involved in. And then from a Building Safety Act, has anyone had to submit anything for Gateway 1? Um, and then the deadlines, or the when the Gateway 2 and 3 kicks in, just kind of getting clarity amongst ourselves. Because like I said, I've had a meeting with, I went to another presentation with Bureau Veritas, for example, and they were talking about the building safety regulator, but also the whole building control um, profession having to register themselves with the regulator. And there was a couple of different acronyms that he used, but he was essentially saying things like they've got to get the commencement definition is now changing as well, apparently. So that's much more onerous. So you can't just pour a bit of concrete, for example, for commencement. It has to be, I think, to the DPC of the building, for example. And if you're doing a multiple phase delivery of multiple blocks, it has to be the DPC to all of those blocks, for example, rather than just one. So and again, I've been in those presentations and I'll try and share them again, because they normally issue the slides. But I think the aim of this meeting is just to kind of go, do we know when the milestone cutoff deadlines are? Have we had any experience of what information we've been asked by whoever? And then from a design point of view, what do we think we need to do going forward to kind of satisfy these requirements? So, I mean, I could start off with one example where we're doing with Westminster City Council. It's an estate in Pimlico, and we're simply, well, I'll say simply, we've been working on it for about 5 years, trying to agree with the residents. It's an estate called Lillington Longmore, which is, it's grade kind of conservation area, grade listed buildings. It's quite a large estate, just just by Pimlico tube station. And we're trying to improve security by just adding security gates, railings, fences to stop a lot of the antisocial behaviour. And part of the listing is because it is so kind of porous in terms of you can get into the estate lots of different ways. So we can't gate it. So the actual design that we're doing is simply to introduce gates which are following on from previous phases, to replicate that. We've had sort of feedback from sort of historic England, etc. But even when we did submit the planning application, the planners asked for a fire statement to align with the regulations that are changing. And the fire consultant was, and I think this is there's a standard sort of matrix that had to be filled in. So simple questions like how many number of stories, what materials, are there sort of vulnerable people living in those blocks, for example, etc. So they weren't too onerous in terms of the questions, but there was a standard sort of structure that had to be submitted for this sort of fire statement that we had to submit as part of the planning application. So that for me is a combination of, I guess, of the Fire Safety Act kicking in, but also Gateway One kicking in on a project that we're doing at the moment. Um, but really beyond that, a lot of the schemes that we're working on haven't been hitting the 18-meter finished floor level of the top habitable um, floor. So we've been kind of applying it on other schemes, but more from not from a best practice with the client and kind of advising them accordingly. But yeah, we've not actually had to. We're not working on a scheme that's high enough to kind of kick in the building safety act as yet. So I don't know whether I could just open it to the to the to the team here, if anyone just kind of maybe give examples of exacting submissions they've had to do or have been requested, which are either bringing some clarity one way or the other, or not. I don't know, Paula, whether you can kick off on anything that you're aware of. I know we've obviously been working on a couple of things ourselves.
Excuse me. So we haven't done anything formally so far, Das, but what we've done is we've adopted complying with the principles of what we think Gate 2 will require. And we've done that to some success. What we're struggling with is getting from our lead designer information on, for example, passive fire protection earlier on than they want to give it to us. And some don't even want to give us that information because they say it's not, they don't want to take design responsibility for it. So what it's done actually is throw up more questions than answers, but it does allow us to start trying to navigate by having early conversations with our consultant teams to say, look, you work with us, you sign up to this, for want of a better word, code of conduct, and we will be doing Gateway 2 ready principles. What we're seeing that at the moment is we're trying to do a clear definition between what is a stage 4 consultant-based design and put CDP on the back burner, because what we think as a first logical step is, because we're not going to be allowed to start on site until we've got a stage 4 design signed off, we're going to say, well, we're going to call that the stage 4 consultant design with enough detail on the fire safety critical elements to be able to get sign off from somebody. And then we'll embellish further with the CDP, with any significant changes having then to be reintroduced back into that pack. So that's where we're taking it at the minute. It's a bit of a, I guess, a first step along the way that doesn't go into the complexities of the CDP integration. I'm not sure if that's other people's experience as well. You're on, sorry, Das, you're on mute. Sorry, I didn't hate saying that.
No, no, no.
Someone.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like sort of the it'll be the phrase that goes on forever, isn't it? But the on those schemes, for example, has Gateway One come into the factor in terms of the submission of the planning either by yourselves or by the previous consultant teams or the client team? Do you know if they had to, or whether it was pre-Gateway One coming on board in terms of like a fire statement? Which at the moment, as far as I understand it, a fire statement is all that we need to submit at Gateway One.
Yes.
But I guess the complexity and the robustness of that, I made a note to myself earlier, is that if that fire statement isn't robust enough and it goes and gets approval, the problem is you're then having to change a lot. You got a bit more time, I guess, between Gateway 1 and 2, but very little, obviously, and maneuverability following Gateway 2 to change stuff, especially if, you know, the London Fire Brigade have been involved, and we know how stretched, you know, they are and all the other teams. So yeah, I don't know on those projects where Gateway 1 was applicable.
We're in a bit of a limbo, so we're starting to see it come through now. We're also starting to see jobs that are landing with us. We're having to go back and retrospectively look at, particularly the high risk buildings, reintroducing an additional staircase so that we can retrospectively comply with what we know is going to come down the line for the Building Safety Act. And one of our jobs at Canada Water, we invited Dame Judith Hackett to come along and talk us through, with our ops directors, our design teams, talk us through where she saw the biggest risks, well, you know, and to demonstrate how seriously we're taking it. And I think the one thing we'll all agree is no one really knows what is going to be expected. So we've just got to be brave enough to start off down a path, assemble a pack, use that as a basis, and then have someone tell us if they think there's any gaps. And that's where we're at the moment. So we're not relying on a Gateway 1 because we're not seeing so much of it. It's starting to come to trickle through now. What we're trying to do is focus on our route to compliance for Gateway 2.
And I guess in terms of the lead designer and their sort of, I guess, hesitancy in providing that passive fire. I mean, is that something that you're supplementing with more input from, let's say, some of the specialists still, or is that you know, that CDP element, are you bringing that a little bit forward, but it's badged under the lead designer, or is it simply that that specialist hasn't come in and hence why they're a bit hesitant?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So we're revisiting our scope of our appointments and our scopes to be explicit about what we're going to need now. And then we're asking our consultants to come back and not just say in general terms, I will operate under our scopes. No, you've got to operate under our scopes, and that includes these safety critical elements. And by exception, you'll have to tell us if you're not going to deliver that, and that will have to be reflected in your fee, because we'll have to then go across and bring in those safety specialists earlier. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as we're all going into it with our eyes open that someone is going to take responsibility for those safety critical elements.
Yeah, and I guess getting the or getting those specialists appointed earlier, because and I think with the presentation we've had previously and the things, even passive is very specific, you know, to wall build-ups and, you know, so on and so forth. Just a fire damper, as opposed to even the active smoke extract and CFD modeling and things like that. So I think, yeah, the way I feel is that if you're doing an early stage planning, for example, you're right. And I think the Gateway 1 is in act already, so there is no getting away from that. Gateway 2, now at the moment, as far as I'm aware from all the different things I've been in, 2023 October, 1st of October is the date. I think the projects have to be to kind of, let's say, avoid it. You'd have to have the project registered with building control and stuff before 23 October. And I think there was something like 6 months before commencement has to happen, i.e. April 24, to meet the new, more stringent commencement requirements. Is that everyone's, I'm opening up again to the wider table, is that everyone's correct assumption or knowledge of the dates? Because obviously that helps us to make sure we're all on that same page. And if anyone else is on the call has got the same dates as I have. Anna, don't know if you've got any, or Jarek. Hi there.
Hi, everyone. Hi. I actually don't know the dates. I'm sorry. So I can't really comment on that. But really interesting, Paula, what you've been saying about kind of getting information into place. We have such a different set of tasks or challenges on different projects. But to just give you an example of a couple which are approaching Gateway 2, so already fairly on the way developed projects. We're the project lead on both of them. Sorry, design lead on both of them. One of them is basically going through a major redesign to hit some of the things. So that's a much kind of bigger kind of thing happening. And the other one has been doing a careful tracking of the design so that it can be submittable for Gateway 2. But what's happening is that one of the suppliers who's been a crucial part of the sort of the process is now not a supplier anymore. So now we will probably have to redesign things again. And this is a supplier who is actually doing builders work halls. So what I'm trying to say is that the kind of the early involvement of subcontractors is great, albeit not easy to maintain or to ensure. Therefore, we now don't quite know how the process will progress, because we'll probably have to redesign again once we know who the new supplier is.
Yeah, I feel your pain, Anna, because we go through similar heartache. There is I don't know. This isn't a plug, by the way, but as you're aware that George is involved as well in a new group that's been set up, the Passive Fire Knowledge Group, which of which I'm a member, but it's got a number of main contractors to act as a sharer of knowledge and a sharer of case studies and best practice and what happens when things go wrong and who to contact to sort out various issues. So that group might start filling in some of those gaps, specifically about these safety critical elements, particularly if one of your subbies or your specialists drops off the radar. So it's worth just I can circulate a link to that. It's worth just having that in your back pocket if you need some help with things like that. But that is all to do with passive fire. Yeah. Okie doke.
So just to iterate what you were saying, we might have to go for something like as designed, or as you said, consultant designed stage 4 submission, assuming all of the good things that we've put in place, with the view to then basically resubmit a portion of stuff once it's actually fixed in procurement. And I wonder whether there is a little bit of a pattern developing there. Yeah, it's too early to say, but we'll see. Almost like a kind of 2-stage submission will have to exist, so that there is a sort of as designed submission to the best of the knowledge of everyone who is on board. I mean, we're talking very detailed design. We've actually designed all of the builders works halls. We scheduled them, we tracked them in the model, we connected them to the products, we've worked with the supplier has specified the product. It's a proper detailed workflow, and now it might need to be redone. So and it involves quite a lot of consultants as well, obviously MEP and the main contractor and everyone. So I wonder whether even for very advanced projects, advanced in detail, there might need to be almost like a sort of split submission, because you do a submission to the best of your knowledge and the design, and then you do the submission once everyone is absolutely on board. And I'm not sure whether that's subtle.
I think that case study is, like I said, probably the most sort of complete I think I've heard of anyone in terms of trying to get to stage 2. Jarek, I know you got your hand up, but just a couple of questions, and if I may, in terms of, I guess this counts for all designers, in terms of, let's say, including, because I'm coming from an architectural point of view as well. So was the client on the second project, I guess the one that you've been tracking and trying to kind of follow what we think is required? So I guess the client, is that a contractor client at the moment, or is it still a private client?
It's basically a contractor developer client, if that makes sense. So it's not a contractor like a contractor that employs everyone else and including the contractors, but it's a developer contractor. So they're really only employing the few main contractors, and everyone else is a subby basically.
Okay. Yeah. And there's a housing scheme, I guess, that you're
It's
that you're
a
working on.
resident. It's a tall, multi-volume resi scheme. Yeah.
Yeah. And have they, in order to get the input from, let's say, the products and manufacturers, which I guess is where Jarek will come in as well, is that the input coming in from with an appointment as such, or still on
Yeah. Okay.
goodwill
So
as such?
that's a very good. I mean, that's probably one of the key questions as well. In this case, it was basically like a PCS. It was like a pre-contract agreement with the supplier under which they were working. And I don't know what the reason is for them not to be on board. It could be that it could be that they're simply oversubscribed, or it might not even be money. That's what I'm trying to say. They're just suddenly not on board anymore.
Right. Okay.
So we don't know, actually. We don't have enough detail about that.
And
But they were under a PCSC or whatever, like a pre-construction. Yeah.
services agreement. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes sense, because I think there's a point that Mark made many times before, I think on a previous call, which is getting input is one thing, but then to actually get design input with some sort of
Yes.
responsibility, that unsurprisingly, that needs someone to be appointed, because
Absolutely.
as we've been talking, the idea of bringing a whole stage forward requires everyone to be on board earlier, to kind of give that continuity, because no one's going to spend all that time just for fun, essentially. Jarek, you had your hand up there. I don't know if you're coming from the other end, I guess the more detailed end.
Yeah, exactly. And apologies if I may, because I didn't take part in a few recent meetings, so maybe it was discussed to death, I guess, anyway. But when Paula and Anne mentioned this consultant design stage for submission, I totally understand where you're coming from, because you do need to develop your design and have it approved. But this sounds so bad from my perspective, because that's exactly where we are at every single project now. And this is what we discussed for the last few months, and sounds like we got nowhere for many reasons, and I totally also understand them, but we haven't got actually a solution. And I'm thinking, if we do need to go that way and submit the design for the stage 4, we do then need time for extra time for design, because if we're talking about REBA stage 4, in stage 5 there is no design activity except variations, or shouldn't be. So, but everyone seems to be ignoring it. And then my question is, based on what you're doing and your experience, do you actually have some, we're talking about gateways, but I'm talking my meaning of the gateways, like a gateways checks to make it 100% clear to the client mainly, and everyone actually involved in the project, what's actually outstanding. Because from practice, from now the projects I'm just about to finish, we're working at Parliament, refurbishing one of the buildings, and everything what could go wrong went wrong. So even during the tender, the client, I'm not gonna label anyone, name company names, but so the client had a consultant who represented them. That company sent tenders out and forgot to include BIM specific requirements. Contractor has been awarded. Specialists have been, there were some incumbents, and then other subcontractors have been awarded. And suddenly everyone realized, oh, this is a BIM project. If you read the documents, anyone who have understanding would know straight away there were BIM requirements. For some, God know what reason, has not been included in the tender pack. So client suffered extra cost, massive cost. Everything was on the back foot, and clearly no checks have been done, and it could be avoided. And there was, as in especially health safety systems mist protection, i.e. sprinkler, has been, it was a CDP element and has been missed, although not missed because it was mentioned everywhere that it will be part of CDP element, but even space for it has not been allocated, and that was critical and threw everything out. So, and I come across this situation every single time on every project, that the consultant design is designed and then the actual design starts, but we're doing it during the construction period, which is absolutely wrong. So we discussed it to death, but we haven't got solution. I haven't got solution, but I guess that's why we're here to find the solution, I think. So I don't know.
And Jared, just to be clear in my hand and to the team, your company is you actually install the various systems, but that's correct, isn't it? So you're a specialist subcontractor, I guess.
Well, tier 2 contractor, sometimes acting as a consultant, sometimes as a designer, and we also as installers. So, and we employ specialist subcontractors.
Which is really nice, because again, I've recently come on a project we're working on, that combination of design and install within the same organization. To me, I think just from as a designer, let alone any of the buildings elements, Safety Act stuff, it's really valuable, because one thing is just to kind of make sure that the drawings or the models fit as such, but then one thing actually is to have the experience from your internal teams about install and maintenance of those things, and getting that feedback into your design loop kind of thing. So, and I guess, Paula, for example, Jarek's organization, are they the kind of ones, and I guess Anna, are they the people that you're thinking about employing to answer Jared's question about in the stage 4, to help the lead designer finish their design, and then therefore that would require some sort of formal appointment with someone like Jarek's organization to then go, okay, look, we've designed it based on these products, these systems, and here therefore is our stage, a gateway to design. Is that what's happening, I guess, Anna, on your project in Paula? Is that what you're imagining, aiming to do in projects going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is yes. The more kind of longer answer is that it can't. If it was only, for example, money that was the issue, then you could sort of say, well, it absolutely has to be done this way, therefore it has to be included in the price. But it could be so many different reasons why the relationship that might be working during stage 4 does not work out for the construction. That's what I'm trying to say, and this is what I think is not quite appreciated in over here in the kind of where we're setting up the standards. We imagine the sort of procurement and the transition from design to construction to be this smooth process that just sort of just happens. It really, world is not like that. The subcontractor or the whole team might be oversubscribed. The product might go off the the supply chain. The supply chain might have issues. Something might, a goalpost might have moved in the meantime. This is the real world is messy, and the standards don't understand messy. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think in the next couple of years we'll probably see a lot of. I know I totally understand what Jarek is saying, that we've been talking about this precisely to prevent this sort of two-stage sort of process, but the split process arrives because the real world of building things is messy, and it is very hard to make it not messy. Involves many people, involves many sort of sides. I think the best we can say is that what's going to happen is that the systems themselves will become much alike, or more alike. Therefore, it will be easier to specify within with one supplier and one system, and then replace with another supplier and another system. Yeah, but it's not going to be an immediate thing. It's going to take. It's going to take. You know, some things will standardize themselves because of this. Just like everything in the world. Yeah.
So just to top and tail with what Anna's saying, Das, Jarek, I completely agree with you. In every sense of what you've just said, I'm absolutely with you. The struggles that we've had are to get particularly our MEPH cousins interested any earlier than stage 4, and we need them to come to the table, and we're really struggling, even though we've got our own building services in-house team, we're really struggling to get those specialist subbies to come in and have the conversations with us earlier. And that plays to the point that Anna's making there. What we have to do as an industry is become more robust in terms of change management. Change should be better controlled than it is at the minute, but we all know there's opportunity in change. So, you know, certain people are in the business to capitalize on change, but from a design point of view, we just want it pinned down. We want the design intent to be safeguarded. We want it to be pinned down by the end of stage 3, spatially coordinated, and then we'll just smash out the details in stage 4. But as Anna says, that doesn't happen. What we're trying to do as a organisation at the moment is we're trialing something where we're going out on the stage 3 information for procurement, and in doing so almost forcing the hand of the subbies to come to the table earlier, to come to the table and have a conversation where they don't feel like they're not going to get anything for that. And I'll let you know how that goes, because we're just in the middle of it now. But MEP, for example, which takes up a lot of the CDP, is always playing catch up. In my experience, my recent experience, they're always playing catch up, and we need to have a frozen set of plans before anyone will come to the table. It doesn't always work like that. So how can we open up that more collaborative role and cut each other a bit of slack and get those detailed conversations happening earlier?
Yeah, and I guess the issue, if I'm being really cynical, is that if you do appoint some specialist at PCSA with an paid appointment, and the workload gets bigger and they find easier jobs, they can just go, well, actually, sorry, I've got to actually go on. And that sort of seemed to be one of the potential reasons for Anna on your project. They might have just found an easier route to make some money. And who wouldn't, if I'm being super cynical, who wouldn't take that route, as opposed to, because they've already been paid for the work they've done up to stage 4. But they're not obliged to do anything going forward.
So absolutely. And and in a way, also if they suddenly got three other very big jobs, they might suddenly don't have time for us. It's that sort of thing. So yeah.
And I guess so that's, I think, a real life project with the best will in the world. And Paula, you being as a large contractor and developer and everything, even with your kind of let's say kind of buying power, cloud solidity, and kind of you're finding it difficult. And if that's being a case for yourselves, how are we going to deal with smaller contractors who might be still building schemes of which do fall into that higher risk if you're just dealing with the definitions, who are not going to have nowhere near that kind of supply chain system set up. So that's, and then obviously, Jarek, coming back to your point, I think we again spoke about it quite early on, is just getting to make sure that the appointments and the scopes are aligned, because it's very easy to have a hole in some way in the DRMs. So I think one of the things we spoke about, that I think we shared out to the team, was to use, I've seen a lot of new DRMs come through with the uniclass classification being the kind of identifier of the risk, rather than brick wall or something like that. And I think that can only help to be a little bit more that structured, in terms of, at least when you see a DRM, it's always got that uniclass, and that's structured and that's standardized, even though it doesn't go into super detail. But hopefully that will be one way to try and avoid holes being happen. The other thing I guess I wanted to ask is about the current issue of the misaligned work stages from different organizations. You've got the RIBA, you've got the CIBSE, you've got others. So the problem is, again, I guess people who are either procuring services to understand that stage 4, this sort of mythical 4A or 4B or 4C or 4D of M&E, what does it actually align to? because on so many projects, the procurement is done, and they say, yeah, we've appointed a sub-consultant, and the sub-consultant, well, yeah, but you've only appointed us 4A, and that doesn't include any of these things. And I know there's been lots of, I'm sure lots of people have done lots of diagrams to try and realign. I don't know if anyone's got a really good example of one where it will be useful to share with the design team. Say, look, looking at the different work stages within different um, uh, uh, sort of accreditations or bodies like the RIBA, like the RICS, like the CIBC. If someone's got an example, because I'm sure this is not the I'm sure people have done this already. That might be quite a good thing to share with others, including ourselves, just so that we know. Hold on, if you're asking Paula, for example, for us to comment on what do we think our scope is, and do we think it copies everything or covers everything, we're like, yes, we think it does, but we're not sure that your M&E or your structures based on there is kind of got everything covered either. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure
I'm
there are
just bringing
examples.
something. Just going to bring something up. If you talk amongst yourselves, that I tried to do something as a starter for 10 to explain to my team the crossover. It's very rudimentary, but I'm happy to share it on the screen if it would be useful. Let me just dig it out.
Well, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Richard. I was just saying to Richard. I think I'm sure George and yourselves might have come across similar sort of diagrams by others. So if that is something that could be shared, that would be good. Just more from a point of view, just understanding across the design teams, where is everyone else? Because I don't think that's necessarily common knowledge as such yet.
So this is kind of the summary there, Das, of how the BISRIA stages align with the REBA stages, and then we've got like a bit of guidance about what you would expect and the crossovers, which is a separate document that I'd have to dig out. But even you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, but how many people don't understand this, that this is where we're at, that there's these 3 stages within that BISRIA element that aligns with REBA 4. And when you start wheeling out phrases like REBA 4A and 4B, it confuses the life out of people, because it should only ever be used in terms of building services term. And even now that's the old one, but these ones don't really trip off the tongue, do they? But we should be using the correct language so that we're all aligned. And Jarek's absolutely right. People still think that you top and tail the design in stage 5. Well, no, that's why there's so much confusion in this industry. Everything is concluded by the end of 4, but 4 could overlap with 5. It overlaps, and that's where the confusion is. So we're trying to go back to basics and explain to people this process, but I think there needs to be more work done on it.
Are we able to have a copy of this, Paula?
Yeah, I'll chuck that over. I can't give you Dame Hackett's contact details, but I could probably find someone, point in the direction of someone who can.
If you could, I'd be very grateful. I've been trying to do something, but yeah, if you could, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, yeah, so I'm happy to drop the link to Passive Fire Knowledge Group. I'll drop this slide in, and anything else that I can find that might be worth feeding into the discussion. And
Fabulous.
And similarly, if anybody's got anything else they've been working on that we can align our thinking, then happy,
Yes,
all
please.
ears.
No, that'd be great. I think the Jared,
Yeah.
I know you see your hand up. The only other question is, I mean, structures is probably less. Again, they have a slightly different sort of definitions as well, and obviously maybe things like rebar, no one's really super. I mean, it's interesting to see on site, but in terms of from a coordination point of view, I think they're broadly speaking aligned to the architectural in terms of output of to enable coordination, but the builder's work is probably the package that is most related to things to do with passive or active fire, let's say, and lots of other things as well. But I think I can't. What I don't know is anyone's done whether there is any differences between the structural engineers' kind of roles and stages and how they call it. But I'd be again interested to know whether structures at the end of stage 4 should be allowing for all builders work openings, for example. I'm not so worried about the rebar details, but that would be the minimum you'd expect, because that has to be aligned to the M&E and the fire and all the other things. Jarek, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. There was lots of things said before I raised my hand, so hopefully I remember of it. I want to challenge you a bit. You know, again, it's based on the most recent projects I'm about to finish. Anna mentioned something that in order to achieve your approval of your design at stage 4, you're doing this consultant design and developed this to such a detail, including builders works, including opening. I think the name of this group is also BIM4HOUSING, and BIM should be to do the minimum required at any given stage. What it sounds to me, and Anna, again, this is not criticism, please don't take it that way, because that's what happened on this project I was involved in, where everything was designed to such a detail. It was great design, but it didn't work. It wasn't coordinated. It had to be changed, and it had to be changed a lot. And someone paid for it. The client pays for it. We shouldn't be in this position on any project. We should be using our knowledge. We should have a checklists. We should have gateways to check what the requirements are. Are we delivering and fulfilling the requirements? Don't do any more than that, because especially when you know that this will be then developed further. What's the point of doing openings for services in the walls if the services are not coordinated? It's waste of time. And that's happening on every single project. What's happening also is we have architectural design developed to different rebus stage than MEP designs. They're always lacking. Someone mentioned the clarity in the employer requirements or exchange information requirements, where we're having documents with rebus stage 4A. No such a stage. We know it's referring to BISRA, but it doesn't say BISRA. It says REBA. And there's so much ambiguity because of it. I think we should be able to, maybe a bit too optimistic, develop some kind of, there need to be some kind of flag which sticks out to everyone who is looking at the documents. This is the assumptions that is developed using those assumptions, and that is still to be developed. It needs to stick. It needs to be simple, so 5 years old understands, because people don't read information. They don't read long texts. They only read a couple of sentences, including our clients, and then things goes wrong. Because even if you're trying to, something needs to be developed at really detailed technical level. No one will read this at that stage 2 or 3, because it's too detailed. No one is interested. So somehow we need to capture the fact that something is not developed and it's a risk. We need to flag it up. All those design risks assessments we're using on the various projects, they're too generic, they're too complex. We need to simplify everything. That's what I feel. I don't know, sorry.
No, and I think the kind of the CDM guidance on visually capturing risks, I'm sure a lot of other people are embedding risks into the models, which is probably, Jared, the best way to make sure people don't miss it. And it's the flags that you referred to, because if you share a model, M&E structures, architectural, landscape, whatever, and it's got these visual cube, we're just using the cubes, the risk cubes, and I think a lot of people are doing them as well now. That's, in my mind, probably the best way to make sure that as the primary bit of data that we're issuing, i.e. the 3-dimensional model, has those. So it's much harder to miss. And I think that aligns with the CDM kind of guidance as well, in terms of visual, making things more visual. So I think I would definitely agree that that's the best way to do it. Sorry, Paula, do you want to come in there or something?
I was just, I agree, Jarek. We've got to go back to basics and do the basics well, where we seem to get all caught up in, the conundrum of the enormity of what we're trying to achieve, rather than just following a set logical set of steps in the process, and we know it's, you know, it's a spiral, it's a coil, isn't it? So it's an iterative process, but we don't work closely enough, particularly with the building services teams. We don't work closely enough from an earlier point of view, and I think that's where we'll drive real and lasting change. Because in my mind, and it's no criticism to consultants of any kind, but what we're finding is a stage 3, what's being packaged as a stage 3 is never a stage 3. It's never fully coordinated. That's what we're finding now. So when you start the stage 4, what you're doing is still trying to fill in the gaps of the stage 3 and complete your spatial coordinated design before you even start detailing. So you're already on the back foot, and this pushes the involvement of the specialist subbies down the line, because they think, well, to hell with it, I'm not getting involved until they've actually made the fundamental decisions about how the building's gonna work. I don't know if that's your feeling as well, Anna and Jarek, whether that's because you're on the tail end essentially of, if we haven't made the right decisions early on, you're having to shoehorn systems into something that doesn't work, and then we all suffer as a result. So I think genuine earlier collaboration with subbies that are set up for BIM, because that's another thing we're finding. Not all of our subbies can make the investment that we need them to in BIM to be able to feed that back into the base model. And so there's all kinds of things that get lost in translation there. It sounds like, Jarek, that your company is well embedded in BIM deliverables, but not everyone is. And how can we work together to upskill that so that there's a consistency?
Yeah, that's. I think everything you said, I agree with 100%. And I don't know what, maybe I'm probably someone mentioned this before. If at every design stage, let's say rebar design stages, if a client had someone who is not contractually related to the previous consultant to check whether the work, to validate whether the design has been developed in line with the requirements and fulfills those requirements, but it needs to be someone who is detached from the consultant, who can't approve his own work because
Agreed.
that's conflict of interest. So and then it becomes a bit more transparent. Oh, this is done, this is not done. But because we're all working together, we want to have a good relationship, and that's all what it is about. We want to work with people, not fight with people. We tend not to shout too loud if something is not quite right, and that's another problem. And we are social animals, and that's unavoidable. So somehow we need to manage this part as well in the right way. So those actually checks are being done. They're not done, and it only comes out at stage 5. But then it's too late.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I think the
No, sorry. Daz, can I just ask, you were asking for a diagram. Were you looking for a kind of scope diagram for consultants, or what kind of diagram were you asking for?
No, it was similar to what Paul has done there with the BIS-RIA
BIS-RIA,
overlay.
yeah.
But obviously there are a couple of other, let's say, the major consultants in terms of structures, civils,
Sure.
and let's say landscape as well.
Yeah.
Because I know they're all slightly working with slightly different things as well. But I mean, back to your point, Paula, like I think the RIBA work stages, when you expand them and the new ones that are coming through, if you read all the parts of the columns, from sustainability to coordination to planning to whatever, and I think many people have said it before, it's not like we're having to do anything different, but just actually doing what's even on that. So when he talks about spatially coordinating and having understanding required rules of thumb, I guess because certain things have become so specialist, and I think this is from years ago, with the architect themselves have given up quite a lot of knowledge, let's say, because it's so specialist, and therefore we're not necessarily aware of some of the kind of rules of thumb about M&E requirements or structural requirements or fire safety requirements, or so we then tend to kind of always rely on more and more, but that kind of information is, because the systems are becoming more specialized or can be more specialized. But I think there's still a baseline level of, that you'd expect the M&E, let's say M&E with some knowledge of sort of sprinklers and fire, to kind of say, well, look, based on our system and our knowledge of sprinklers, we think you need the bigger ceiling void, for example. But no one's necessarily, I don't know, either because they don't want to, or because they're not specialist enough, or they've, like architects, have given up quite a lot, are not able to make that stage 3 spatial coordination call, which actually will be still correct. Because a lot of the time we've had so many emails on every project, M&E, please confirm so ceiling soil and void required. Got it, provided it. Oh, it goes up later on. It's sort of, it can't, and that's across lots of consultants and stuff. So Anna, the overlay was more about on whether there's anything more. There'll be another version that someone's done, which is RIBA, BISRA, and others, so the major consultants. Just like I said, just to share, just to kind of share the knowledge with our design community.
But
And then the other diagram, which I find really useful, is just the gateway timeline getting. I know there was obviously the diagram that was released in the government websites, which showed the little sort of the zone, the periods. It was like T plus 12 months and T plus 24 months and whatever. But I think now some of those have become defined dates. So again, someone would have done, and Richard, this is the maybe I think George might know someone, or there might be someone else, which is basically got, okay, now based on 2023, these are the dates for any project that starts, and then there'll be a sector of relevant buildings and non-relevant buildings, and
like a like a timeline.
Just a simple timeline, which is the government did one, and they gave defined periods following the act coming into power. But now that I think some of those have now actually got specific dates.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, when I had the presentation by Andy Lowe from Bureau Veritas, Building Control, there's another layer which is to do with building control inspectors and getting, their organization now needs to be registered. And then the individuals also need to be registered, because you can't use approved inspectors going forward. It has to go through the registered. So there are kind of 3 layers.
A lot of layers, aren't there?
I can see the building control assessors sort of layer, which is one that Andy was talking about. There's obviously relevant buildings, non-relevant buildings as they stand, and then the Fire Safety Act elements. There's probably like 4 lines. And I think that I mean, even like I said, I've been to various presentations and the dates are coming in, but I can never 100% remember. And for me, a little markup is the easiest for.
I'll speak to George and see if we can put all those together into sort of one diagram or something. Would that help?
Because I don't think it'll take very long. What I'll do, I'll share the one that is I think there's one. If I share it now.
Yeah, if you bash up, if you put in the chat or something you've already got, and then we can gather those and put them together, consolidate.
This is the one that is on the government website, which people would have seen. So this is the one which is Royal Assent plus 2 months, 12 months, etc. But I think now again, there's probably been some either things have slipped or things have actually now been cemented onto this timeline. So that will be again just a DAS idiot's guide to.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
But
that's just going back to what you were saying previously. I think there's a big piece in that about who takes responsibility for what, and we say a lot about we talk a lot about restoring nobility to kind of the professions, the consultants, and taking accountability as a contractor. Sometimes the design manager, we can water down that role and lead people down a certain path, and that's maybe stopped some practices from actually being dogged about what they're delivering. So I think there's a real piece about the role of the lead designer in all of this, because essentially they are the conductor of the orchestra, aren't they? They are coordinating that team, the team outputs should be coordinated by the lead designer, and the timeline should be established by the lead designer with input from everybody in that team. And what we're finding is a whole load of stuff's being chucked over the fence. Those hot potatoes are being chucked over the fence by the lead designer, if it's anything that isn't bricks and sticks. And is it a risk averse? Is it we're turning people into being really risk averse rather than doing what they're meant to do as a lead designer? I'd be interested to get Anna's point of view on that. Well, and yours, Das, and anybody else who wants to contribute. But just, we see that anything that has a bit of difficulty or complexity about it, no, it's a specialist subby package. Over the fence it goes, and it can get forgotten, as Jarek mentioned, that with the sprinklers, because there's just not that specialist level of knowledge. In terms of leading that coordination piece, you know, as a lead designer, I'm not sure that that's firing properly at the moment.
Yeah, now what's your I'll come back
Well,
up to my view, your experience on this project, which on all grounds sounds like you've tried to set it up with all the knowledge that we know, and I guess Scott Brownrigg are the lead consultant, but I assume where there are elements that are unknown, it's either been flagged to the client to say, look, actually, these things we can coordinate with the team. You know, the classic kind of statement is like, we can only coordinate with the information we have from the specialists who are on board.
Yeah.
And I guess then the lead designer's role is to flag anything that is missing from that knowledge pool to the client, the developer, whoever. And as I say, and I've learned sort of over, just sort of projects and kind of do's and don'ts about also, I think, lead designers had to be firmer in terms of saying, look, your program or whatever, it just doesn't work. And it's easy to get bulldozed, but at the same time, this is giving us the opportunity to do, not to extend it by crazy amounts, but just to be realistic in that critical path, because we do have to be a bit more critical pathed to make sure all the ducks are aligned properly. So I think the lead, because theoretically design managers have no design responsibility at all. They're kind of also helping to kind of bridge appointments between consultants and subcontractors and the site teams, and can help orchestrate those things which are outside of the lead consultant's remit, which is really predominantly do with, like, let's say the site team, the procurement team, the methods teams, all of those kind of things. Yeah, I think lead designers, we have probably lost some knowledge, but because things have got more complicated, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But there's no harm, but that it's not that it can't be resolved. That, and I guess on Anna, on your project, have you found that your roles has had to expand, or have you had to get more people in that you wouldn't normally on the previous project?
I mean, not necessarily. Obviously, the BIM side of things have expanded, and yeah, and definitely our own kind of, I'd say, limited knowledge of systems, because, you know, frankly, systems are quite complex nowadays in buildings. So we as architects can't pretend that we can assume, you know, a sort of MEP design that hasn't kind of been completed. I think that in a very simplistic way, I'm just drawing a diagram for myself so that I can say the sentence basically. There is a design, and then there is the kind of detailed design. Think of REBA stages in very broad terms, yeah? And then there is a subby input, yeah? Whether that subcontractor input happens in stage 4 or 5, it really doesn't matter where it is. But what you have to remember is, after the subcontractor input, there needs to be another round of coordination, yeah? Because the coordination that happened before the subcontractor input is not real coordination. I mean, it is real, but it's kind of broad term coordination. And this second round or third round of coordination is usually invisible in both RIBA or BISRIA or actually our clients' minds.
Yeah, totally agree.
We say to them, if you're bringing the subcontractors late on board, we will need another round of coordination, at least 2 rounds of coordination before things are real. And they look at us and go, but we're in stage 5, we're not paying you for coordination. And we're like, yeah, you're not paying us for coordination. Who's going to do it? They're like, well, it doesn't need to happen because it's happened in stage 4. And, and we round, we go in a same circle. It is a very simple diagram. It's basically coordination, sub-input coordination. That's absolutely what needs to happen. And after that second round of coordination, we will be able to give somebody a certain design that can be built. At the moment, I think the problem is time and money. No one really sees the need for that second round of coordination. So what we're really doing we're doing it on a kind of on a sly. We're sort of getting paid to monitor stuff on site, but actually we're sort of doing the coordination in the background so that things actually still work out. So you don't have to cut holes on site or, you know, demolish entire bits of ceiling and stuff like that. Yeah. And this happens on different sectors, not just residential. And in some sectors it happens even more. You know, if you're doing transport or you know, advanced tech or anything like that, where MEP is massive, the need for this is even bigger. So I'm coming with the knowledge of other sectors as well. So what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily that the people are not doing the job. I think it's the fact that the industry hasn't quite caught up with the fact that there is a whole hidden stage that needs to happen once the subcontractor input has been done, basically.
Yeah, totally
yeah.
agree with that, Anna. And that is still a stage 4 activity, and that
that is still a stage 4 activity. Absolutely
overlaps with stage 5, and that's what people don't always. I mean, it's explicit in the REBA Plan of Works 2020. It even says it in most projects. Stage 4 and stage 5 will overlap. So I think it might just be a bit of an awareness piece, actually.
Maybe. But it's to do with fees. You know, we still do our fees at stage 4 and then stage 5. And then if you say to the client, but I'm sorry, our stage 4 fee is overlapping by 6 months into your stage 5, they'll be like, but why? Like, yeah. why are we still paying you if you already done your design? So yeah, I think the overlap between the knowledge, as you say, the knowledge piece and the procurement itself, which is the money, it still hasn't happened. And maybe the Gateway 2 will push this. I don't know.
And I think that's a really nice way to put it about that subcontractor and then coordination V2, V3. I think at the moment, it's fair to say on all projects, that second round of coordination is done via shop drawing comments, ultimately, because that's the you know, it's the only way for us to and we have this debate with our clients at the moment about, oh well, you've got to update your design to meet the shop drawing. Like, yeah, but that just means like updating 200 drawings just to match the shop drawings, which is what you're ultimately building off. Obviously there's a whole then discussion about final record, and so it's sort of doing things for the sake of it, as you say, twice, where if you get more input earlier on from the specialist, then your designs for construction are more refined, and therefore the shop drawings aren't a commenting coordination role. There simply should be a, yep, size opening is fine. We assume everything else is fine because we've already spoken about it, not having to check every dim, every word and every phrase in the tiny text, because one of them might say, oh, U values are this. It's like, no, but that's not the right U value, or the color is slightly wrong or whatever. So I would say at the moment, most coordination with subcontractors is done by shop drawings. And then you get the argument of, if you make a comment like, but that wasn't in your tender drawings. Yeah, but we didn't know, we didn't have that input at that stage. So we had to draw something that's spatially accurate and design intent. But obviously, then we get the specialists like, well, we can't put that element there because it contravenes some other regulation that is very specific and niche. So yeah, we end up, reviewing, hundreds of drawings through the shop drawing process. But actually, as I say, if you pull things forward, then that should, not that all of that will have been done because they wouldn't have necessarily produced shop drawings, but maybe the subcontractors need to be appointed to do, I don't know, their sort of stage 4 drawing set as well, maybe, because all the time at the moment we just get generic Otis lift drawings. It's just their standard lift drawings for any lift in the world, but it's not specific. But maybe if they are appointed to do a round one in a PCSA that we then coordinate with, I'm thinking aloud here, and then after that's been involved and put it into the coordination at stage 4, then they may do another round of drawings which are just picking off the specific tiny specifics, or things that they need to press a button to manufacture on offsite somewhere. Yeah, I mean that's sort of, yeah, thinking about, but yeah, at the moment, as I say, Anna, all of that is done via that streamline stage 5 fee, which is quite low, but all via the shop drawing. Then you had this, yeah, like I said, then the other kind of argument at the end about, well, you got to incorporate everything to final record. It's like, yeah, but we don't, we can't. I mean, that's another X amount of money.
Yeah. And the typical one is as exactly what you said. A lot of stuff is being done in 2D, which is great. But who is then updating the model to reflect as built or as constructed or whatever? So all those questions are still quite big questions. I mean, maybe some of what Gateway 2 is going to push will bring the answers to this, and we will see earlier kind of involvement of everyone, or maybe there will be a little bit of a different fee structure in stage 5, acknowledging that this needs to happen. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I think the Gateway 2 is obviously demanding we do more earlier. So rather than push more fee into 5, bring more fee, but not just fee, but more input, appointed input or design liability input from those specialists that the design team cannot be necessarily expected to know. Jared, got your hand up. It'd be quite interesting to know from you whether you've done a scheme where, like I said, I was just thinking aloud about the sort of 2-stage subcontractor input at sort of stage 3, 4, and then followed by another round of shop drawings, which is for, picking things off the tiny bits. Has that something like that you've been involved in?
So we doing it on every single project, basically. I think Paula touched on this as well. So that's exactly what's happening. What I think the construction industry should be doing is, instead of, if you compare this to manufacturing of a car, would you ever press the button to produce and start production line on the car which has not been fully designed? You would never do that, would you? And that's what we're doing in construction industry on every single project. We need to somehow turn it around. And I don't have an answer, I'm sorry, but what someone mentioned, Anna mentioned fees and so on, and I agree, this is probably the main reasons. That's we are where we are, type of contracts and so procurement methods and so on. And then someone mentioned awareness, we need to raise awareness. If for me, I'm thinking about it for a long time. What would be the first, if I had to send one message across to everyone, client, the whole project team, my message would be to educate everyone that at REBA stage 5, there is no design activity other than managing changes. We should be shouting this to everyone so it's embedded in everyone's head. I think that would help.
Yeah, that's nice and clear, isn't it? Nice and simple. Richard, I don't know. I know you've been involved in other schemes, whether any of the things to do with sort of the questions that we raised to the procurement team from client side, either developers, are things that they are working with. I mean, Paula, you're sort of between the two, aren't you? Because sometimes you're the developer, client, and contractor and stuff. But I don't know, Richard, if there's anything that might be what we've talked about, which has come into some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Well, you mentioned procurement. I was going to actually ask, does that new review on product testing affect you guys? The morale review, is it?
Not heard of it, Richard. Sorry.
Right, came out last week. It's an independent review that's commissioned by the government on Levelling Up Department, I think, on product testing. From what the bit that I've heard about it, it's going to turn things on their heads just for a change. I just wondered how much does that affect you, or is that kind of for you? This is my ignorance talking, by the way. How much does that affect you in specifying or do you, as long as it's
Is this
approved,
the
it doesn't matter how
is this
it's
the
approved?
is this the new ombudsman brought in as part of the Building Safety
Sorry?
Act? Because is this the new ombudsman?
No, this is the morale review that came out last week, which was done for the Department of Levelling Up. It's what's it called?
I know there was the
It's
kind of
independent review of the construction product testing regime.
Oh, the testing regime. Okay, because I know there was a new role created to review product full stop to make sure that they're fit for purpose and
Right.
stuff, and that was going to be yeah. So if you're on that list, then that's all great to kind of be used. This testing methodology is obviously another. It's very much sort of down into the manufacturer's kind of level, which
That's what I was
yeah,
wondering.
I'm not really.
It probably didn't affect you. This happens before you, doesn't it?
I would think so. I think it'll affect. I don't know. For example, we use MBS, Chorus for specification writing. So the way that we would expect, let's say, any products that might be on their list would have gone through the various checks and balances.
Right. So it's kind of before it gets to you.
But again, I don't know if the others have experienced this. Jerry, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry. I'm kind of want to change the subject, being mindful of time, and I thought meant to talk a little bit about the digital construction week and what we're actually trying to achieve there and so on. Is that all? Am I missing a point?
No, Richard, again, jump in because I think you've been involved in the other conversations. But I think the main gist that I got from George was just trying to get from the different teams. Do we know where we are? Do we know what we need to produce? And do we know how we're going to do it? If I'm sort of broadly kind of categorizing, I think the request for the timeline was to do with, do we know where we are, sort of in the timeline of the Fire Safety Act, the Building Safety Act, and I guess the changes to building control, the commencement of projects and those definitions. They're the three main overlays that I can think of myself in terms of, do we know where we are? Do we know what we need to submit? I think the general answer is probably no, because there isn't a checklist that the building safety regulators issued, and as far as I understand, will issue. And I don't know whether, Paula, when you had Dame Hackett through, whether that was reinforced or not. And then I guess in terms of what do we need, the things that we talked about here are not necessarily new things that we talked about, but actually it's great to get, for example, Paula and Anna, your real life experience feedback, because it just shows you that just bringing a stage forward, yeah, I mean, exactly that's what you're doing, Anna, it's brilliant, but that's actually brought up a whole load of other real life problems, which had never occurred to me. Why, the specialists going off the job because they don't want to do it or whatever, or something going bust. So, and how does, if you got to that level of detail, is the building safety regulator going to be happy and say, like, yes, you designed it to that level. We understand there are some issues that you might need changing, but in principle, we're happy for you to go through Gateway 2. Do we know whether what the answer is? No, I don't think we do. Whether that will be a compliant or not, I don't think we do. So as Paula, you said, we've just got to try and almost set the rules ourselves and show that, a bit like the CDM, these are the decisions and the discussions that we've had to make that decision. Therefore, there's an audit of that and a golden thread of that. And here it is. Please review and provide, because there's no checklist that's been issued. I think that's the kind of things that Jared, you were asking for about, yes, we've submitted this, and this, so we're good to go. I mean, I guess you theoretically, with the building control inspectors, you normally get, for example, a plans review. And one of the things they're talking about is you can't do a notifiable start on site anymore with a high risk building once we've gone through the gateway cutoffs. So you basically, I think it's a bit like in Europe, actually, you have to submit all the technical drawings first. They all get reviewed, and then you get the permit to start construction. I think, Paul, probably from your Bouygues days, I think that's what Dave said used to happen in, in France and stuff when he was working there, is that there's much more heavy full plans details submitted in Europe before you get the sign to start on site, and that's essentially what we're being asked to do.
Oh, it's going back to one of your previous points, Das, that we shouldn't be frightened of this. It's nothing new. It's just forcing us to do what we should have been doing all of these years. And if you're absolutely right, if we were to follow the drop downs against each of the REBA stations, just do what is required of us rather than trying to cut corners as an industry, then we will, by proxy, be compliant against Gateway 2. The issue is we haven't been doing it. We haven't been doing it to the letter of the law, and that's why there's been problems. So
you're saying, Paula, that you do actually know what you need to do. The issue has been that you haven't been doing it.
Well, as an industry, we haven't been doing it.
I didn't mean you personally.
We know. Okay, we don't know what we don't know. Let's start with that. So things will happen that there are gaps that we can't foresee. What is coming to light from various case studies that you can read in the media is we haven't, as a industry, been building things to the standards. And when they start pulling off bits of cladding, they realise that people haven't been doing that. So first of all, we need to understand what the standards are. Second of all, we need to design to them and get someone to sign them off, because we can't be trusted as an industry. Thirdly, we need to evidence that what we install, what we build, is in accordance with that. Now, isn't that just is in accordance with the approved detail? Isn't that just the basics of what we should be doing anyway? As a
do you
integrity?
Yeah, the key thing is though, do you have the view of what you need to do?
So
we know that the government's not going to tell us anything. Yeah. So you've got to work it out for yourselves. So have you worked it out? Do you know what you need to do? That's kind of, I think, the crux of it.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is no. Short answer. The long answer is the great work that us as BIM4HOUSING have been doing is starting to establish that you can't deal with things in isolation. You have to look at them in their absolute context. How far do we need to go into that? I mean, essentially, a stage 4 design, you should be able to build, operate, maintain. It says it's there in black and white on the REBA. So we need to go into whatever level of detail we need to go into that will conclude a compliant solution. So there's not a checklist. Maybe that's what we're starting to do with George and the rest of our BIM4HOUSING team. And against the safety critical elements, I think there's been good progress made so far.
And very much so. Can I just put a plug in there? We are the 11 guidance documents we did the roundtables a couple of years ago. Yeah. We are looking, we've had a lot of work gone into that, further work got into that, and we're looking at reissuing. They're an ongoing thing, as we know, but looking at reissuing those as a second edition. And we're going to be holding roundtables in June for each of those safety critical elements. You'll all be contacted, so please be on the lookout for that, because it would be great to have you involved in them.
Brilliant. Well up for it, Richard.
Excellent. That's very good to hear, Paul. Thank you. Sorry, Des, I hijacked you.
No, totally. Oh, that was it. I think the evidencing element is where obviously the digital tools are, the better information management definition of BIM comes into it, because thanks, Anna. Thank you very much for your input. That's really useful. That's where it's kind of going to the evidencing and maintain the golden thread using the digital tools is where it's a step change, I guess, because previously there's been holes in the evidencing or kind of whatever to mean that it's not clear what's happened and why the decisions have been made or not made or things done. So in terms of do we know what we need to do, I think it's maintaining the evidence trail is a minimum. We've got to maintain that. And that's the golden thread, I guess, because I say in a simplistic way, everything else that's in like the RIBO best practice should mean that we get to a building which is safe. I think maybe one of the things that's happened is with the DMB have got a lot to good good things about it, but it's also eroded the kind of what should be done in different stages. And a lot of people are obviously not willing to invest and time and money for whatever reason, obviously at the earlier stages, to complete the design in more detail or to the required detail, because it's
Well, and
risk averse. Is you don't want to
Well,
spend
let me ask
£100.
you. Okay, so you guys here, what are you doing now? Because of this legislation, what are you doing now that you weren't doing before?
we're questioning novations. That's one of our biggest bugbears at the minute, that we inherit a design team that haven't signed up to the same scope, the same quality, the same safety standards that we would wish for our projects. And so what we're finding is previously we just accept novations and then try and fill in the gaps at cost to ourselves. Now we're saying, we're having open conversations with our customers and saying, we want to bring our partners, our consultant partners, we've already agreed T&Cs, we've already agreed the level of diligence and quality and the scope. We don't have to have those arguments. They know that we want a certain level of BIM implementation. Let us come and deliver this for you at stage 4, rather than you just hand over the incumbents because there's some political thing about the politics of it. Let us come and deliver this at stage 4, and that is the biggest change we're making at the minute, Richard, is taking control of the process and making sure it's done properly.
That's very interesting, actually.
It's gonna be we're in it for the long haul. It's a long game, not a quick fix. But
I remember going way back to those round tables, that one of the things that came up a lot was where does the designer's responsibility finish? Do you remember?
Yeah.
And that's quite interesting, you saying that you're taking that responsibility, like you're choosing to actually do that and say, we're going to run this so it's done properly. So
to caveat, the contractor would never take the design responsibility, but we'd take the responsibility for creating a competent team that will deliver in accordance with the compliance gateways. And that, so we're taking a proactive step to do that, because at the minute it's a bit scattered and a bit hit and miss.
Somebody's got to take it by the throat, haven't they? Basically,
yeah,
that's what it comes down to. Somebody in those early stages, whatever role it might be, has just got to say, right, do it. It's got to be done. Not passing the buck or passing the job.
Yeah.
Somebody's just got to do that.
And accepting that you're not going to be able to tick every box the first 1 or 2 or 3 rounds, but you with each go at it, you'll get better.
It's a path. It's a journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the I guess thinking aloud again, Richard, to answer your question, like obviously the not in a negative way, but to demand from the team, the client, the developer, whoever, that certain things need to be in place to enable us to do that job properly, and having to sometimes be a little bit more, well, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't continue and try and fill in the gaps or make assumptions, but it doesn't, I don't think, really help anyone not to be a little bit firmer sometimes, with an alternative proposal in front of what's necessarily the current status quo. So, on a number of projects, the M&E software hasn't been appointed, maybe should have been appointed, and we would have carried on. But for the same reason that Anna's talking about, we would end up basically doing another round of comments, or there'll be niggles during the construction.
So one of your changes is that you want better information from the client.
From the team, and that goes all the way back to procurement, Richard. So again, this idea of bringing, and what Anna's project and the team and the client seem to have done is exactly, I think, what needs to happen. But having done that, they still have fallen over. And then obviously what Paul is trying to set up in the structure that Wade operates is the right format. But there are new problems, I guess, that we're going to find. But that's a different problem, I guess, or a better problem. I don't know if that's raised, but we can only try and do better, because there's no joy in the joy goes out of projects when you're basically just bickering and kind of nitpicking
Yeah.
at construction stage, and it's just not good for anyone. Let's
think
just be
Richard
mindful
does
of that process before.
Sorry, Das. I think Richard makes a good point, though, that we've got to educate our customers to make the right decisions up front and to be flexible in their, or pragmatic in their approach to who is going to take the design forward at what stage, what rules and parameters they're going to set at the front end, so people don't it's not a race to the bottom, you know, just buy the cheapest, buy whoever can do it the quickest. No, you buy who's going to deliver a proper, compliant, safe solution that's going to give the quality that you want, and no one's going to have a nervous breakdown trying to deliver it. And that isn't where we're at the minute. It is a bit of a race to the bottom. We need to switch that mindset, that culture.
So much we've over the last couple of years that keeps coming through is, and which is why we do keep, to be fair to ourselves, we do keep pushing. What we say to each group, fine, what do you need?
Yeah.
From the people further downstream, what do you need? And I think we're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Keep on trucking.
Well, exactly,
Keep on trucking.
No, that's
I'm
that's
gonna
been
have
really
to.
good. No, I think we're all kind of finished.
Paula,
Thanks, Paula. Thank you very much.
Put me in touch with the person for Hackett. That'd be fantastic.
I will. Let me ask who arranged it, and I'll drop you a name and see what we can't do or
Fantastic.
can do. Rather.
Thank you.
Good to chat with everyone, and it's always a vibrant discussion with us lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Speak to you
Cheers,
later.
Das.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
Richard.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, Dad.